I'll be chairing today's meeting, and in case I get lost, the staff has been kind enough to put into red the things that a 60-year-old man may not be able to read. So, and I appreciate that. No, they've been actually very kind to me. Our first order of business is approval of the November 15th, 2018 minutes. Do I have a motion as to the approval of those minutes?
Move approval.
Is it seconded?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes of the last meeting. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
We got to do a roll call.
Oh, I'm sorry. All those in favor, please say yes when your name is called. Oh, before we go on, see, I can't read these things. Is there any public comment? All right, may we have a roll call, please?
Jose Campos?
Yes.
Dan Jacobson?
I abstain. I wasn't here.
Luz Molina Lopez?
Yes.
Alicia Burhow?
Yes.
And Michael Savoy?
Yes. You also need to establish a quorum before you started the meeting.
Thank you. The motion passes. We do in fact have a quorum, but let's take a roll call, kind of in a reverse order here, and we'll start with Michael.
Michael Savoy.
Jose Campos.
Dan Jacobson.
Luz Molina Lopez. Alicia Burhow.
We have a quorum, and I'll deem that that was done prior to our taking the last issue up. On agenda item number 2, we're having a discussion and possible action regarding continuing professional education reciprocity. Ms. Pierce, would you like to give your presentation?
Thank you. The purpose of this agenda item is to provide the California Board of Accountancy with the opportunity to discuss the topic of continuing education reciprocity as stated in the National Association of State Boards of Accountancy Uniform Accountancy Act Model Rules, which I will refer to as UAA Model Rules. NASBA developed the UAA Model Rules to assist jurisdictions by creating uniformity in the regulatory schemes governing the practice of public accountancy. Although many of the CBA regulations mirror the UAA Model Rules, the CBA maintains independence in the establishment of its requirements in California. During NASBA's 2018 annual meeting, the topic of CE reciprocity was discussed. Following the meeting, a member requested that this topic be presented to the CBA. UAA Model Rule 6-7 establishes provisions for CE reciprocity, which allows CPAs to meet only the CE requirements of the state where their principal place of business is located. The specific text of the rule is included on page 2 of the agenda item. CPAs become licensed in multiple jurisdictions for various reasons. If the CBA were to move towards CE reciprocity, it would be relying on the CE requirements of other state boards of accountancy to ensure those licensed in multiple jurisdictions and who have a principal place of business outside of California are maintaining competency while practicing public accountancy. The CBA requires CPAs to complete a total of 80 hours of CE in the 2-year period immediately preceding their license expiration date. Staff researched the CE requirements of other jurisdictions, which are included on attachment 2. The biggest difference between California and the jurisdictions researched was the required technical CE and CE required based on the performance of auditing and preparation engagements. Attachment 3 identifies the jurisdictions who either participate or are moving towards CE reciprocity. If the CBA believes that it would like to further discuss CE reciprocity, staff can perform additional research and provide a more comprehensive overview at a future meeting. That includes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions the members may have.
Michael.
Yeah, I find this a little bit different than mobility. This is reciprocity, which carries multiple certificates in multiple states, and I do not agree to just accept CPE from other jurisdictions as what's governing us. In particular, we have that course on regulation. I think at the minimum, that should be required for them to maintain a license in California. And anything else we come up with that is specific to California, I think we should list it out and discuss it. But I do not think blanket reciprocity should be given when we do have some regulatory issues and other things that are very specific to California.
Is there any other comment?
Well, I'm in favor of hearing more about the implications of this. I would assume with the advent of mobility that the incidence or the need for this is not as great as it used to be, where people were required to be licensed in every state and you had a number of places. Now, people still are hanging on to legacy licenses, and so I guess my long-winded question is, what do we think the incidence of this or the frequency of need for this would even be? It might be fairly narrow, in terms of people regarding a different state as a home license and applying or indicating that they comply with that state and hence want reciprocity in California, as opposed to the other way around, right? You being a home resident here where it doesn't matter, and if the other state accepts it, great. The small sample you had here, though, thus far, seems to have very comparable CE requirements. There are nuances, right? We have the 2020 in each year. Some states require 40 annually, so you got some variety. I agree with Michael on you got couple things that I've generally seen apply no matter where the heck you're doing things. The regulatory course and the ethics courses sometimes are very state specific. I think ours is a little more broad. We accept things more broadly. So maybe there isn't as much to have to consider there. But I think it's worth exploring. I think it'd be helpful to understand if you've got half the states already accepting, reciprocity and more on the way. I think it's worth having further dialogue and how would it function. I would probably see a situation where we accept something, but it's got a couple nuances that people would have to comply with in seeking their renewals.
Thank you. Is there any other comment or questions for Ms. Pierce? I have a question. So, under the current regime, is it correct that if a person is licensed in state X and follows all of the CE requirements for state X, that person has the mobility access to California?
If they meet the mobility provisions in California,
Jose, did you want to have staff review this more, or to bring this up at another meeting?
You're looking for a motion. I move that staff continue to explore this agenda topic and bring it up at a future meeting.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
May we please have a roll call?
Well,
Public comment.
Oh, public comment and then a roll call. No
well,
public comment? May we have a roll call, please?
Well, can we just more
Further
just
discussion.
Oh, sure.
sure. One item to explore is you do CE audits on renewals, and I would imagine that through now we've had incidents where, let's assume for a minute, somebody's licensed elsewhere, so they're trying to comply with multiple jurisdictions CE, but when you line it up, they might have different timetables, right? We've got a firm 2-year kind of way we look at it year over year. I don't know if the experience you've had in those CE audits is that you've had some people in complying with other jurisdictions missed your timing window by just a matter of days or what have you. And I know I've seen that where somebody applies a course they took shortly after your renewal window, that you apply, and obviously they can't double count it in multiple periods, but maybe there's some experience coming out of our CE audits that informs the incidence, the level of issues that you might have in this regard.
You're concerned with different renewal periods for those different states. One might, because ours ends
Yeah.
the birthday month end where they might be a calendar, so you may have some
Well, I
flipping.
just I'm licensed in multiple jurisdictions, and so there's always a crosswalk of, okay, if this met these courses, does it all line up for every state's jurisdiction in terms of what you're doing? It's never really been an issue, but I can imagine that if you're right at the cusp of just meeting the 80 hours, you could end up with those little lag timing issues. And maybe one of the considerations is that we become a little more flexible with respect to short cutoff issues like that you might have on licensees meeting different periods.
Oh my gosh.
Is there any further discussion? Any further public comment?
I'm just fascinated that, I guess I'm just fascinated with what's a normal amount of licenses you can have in multiple jurisdictions? So when you say multiple jurisdictions, do you mean?
55, there's 55
So
jurisdictions.
you could be licensed in 55 states or
Yeah, but
55, so
it's not
50
necessary.
states plus 5 jurisdictions if you wanted to? I was just curious.
I guess if you're that, whatever, but
If you're that ambitious.
It depends on how you practiced. I mean, you just got to think about pre-mobility.
Yeah,
If you were to sign a report in a given state, you had to be licensed in that state.
right,
And so in the Southwest, let's say you had a regional practice,
right.
it would not be inconceivable that you'd have a Nevada, a Utah, Arizona,
Yeah.
California license to manage your practice.
Yeah, just hearing all that, based on, say, just 5 states alone, maintaining all that CE, for every single state, that's
well,
yeah.
it's the
Yeah.
same.
Some it's the same,
And what we're talking about is there
Yeah.
are differences in California
right.
that would want us to tack something on to stuff that's common to, how many, 20-something have already jumped on board?
Yeah,
Out of 55, so
right.
that's what we're looking
Okay,
at.
and I just want to make sure I'm clear on
Nobody's
that.
no, I don't think anybody's that ambitious that owns 55 licenses.
Thank God.
There is somebody?
Jose
Are you
is.
serious?
Is
Is this picture on the wall somewhere?
Yeah,
On his grave,
he
bro.
needs a,
Wow.
Roll call, it sounds like.
Lots of certificates on his wall. Any public comment?
That's unbelievable.
May we please have a roll call?
Michael Savoy.
Yes.
Alicia Burhow.
yes.
Dan Jacobson.
Yes.
And Jose Campos.
Yes.
Oh, Luz Molina Lopez.
The motion,
Oh, hold
Molina
on.
Lopez.
Yes.
the motion passes, and we'll move on to item number 3, a discussion of possible action to provide comments to the National Association of State Boards of Accountancy on proposed revisions to the Uniform Accountancy Act's model rules, those published in January of 2019, relating to the administration of peer review. Mr. Franzella.
Thank you.
Oh, by the way, put your tie back on. We're back on TV.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you and good morning. So this agenda item is being presented to provide the CBA with an opportunity to discuss NASBA's proposed revisions to Article 7 of the UAA. The CBA is being asked to consider the NASBA proposed changes and approve the comment letter that staff have prepared in Attachment 5, including any edits that members may have. Again, NASBA has developed the UAA to promote uniformity in the regulatory schemes governing the practice of public accountancy in the various jurisdictions. In January of this year, NASBA approved the release of a revision to the model rules with the primary focus on peer review, which staff have provided in Attachment 1 to your materials. NASBA has requested comments on the proposed changes by June 30th. The document NASBA provided didn't have any amendments noted in track changes or some kind of type of comparative format. NASBA also didn't provide any particular background on the changes. Thank you. Staff have been informed that the primary thrust of the changes relate to the contraction that's been occurring with the administering entities as it relates to the AICPA's peer review program. So to aid the CBA in kind of understanding the breadth of the changes, staff have included excerpts from the present iteration of the UAA specific to Rule 7, and these, I believe, are in attachment. Let's see. Attachment 2 to your materials. Staff took the proposed revisions in attachment 1 to the PRC for its review at its February 2019 meeting. Both staff and the PROC concur that the existing CBA statutes and regulations, which staff have provided in attachments 3 and 4, have provisions that are comparable and consistent with NASBA's proposed revisions to the UAA Rule 7. Overall, the NASBA proposed revisions standardize guidelines for AICPA administering entities and the administration of their peer review programs. The revisions also include provisions related to firm requirements to notify a board, various peer review definitions, peer review documentation submission requirements, peer review related extensions, and various other peer review administrative issues. Staff have identified 2 areas within the proposed NASBA revisions that the CBA may wish to explore further. Members can locate these 2 items on page 4 of your material. And the first area relates to submission of peer review documents and is included in UAA Model Rule 7.5 in Attachment 1. This proposed rule would require firms to submit peer review reports to the Board of Accountancy regardless of the peer review rating. Licensees would satisfy this requirement electronically by allowing the administering entity to make peer review documents available on the AICPA's Facilitated State Board Access System. As it relates to the CBA, presently we only require firms to submit peer review when they receive a peer review rating of fail. The second area the second area the CBA may wish to consider is related to attest documentation and retention as included in UAA Model Rule 7.9. A subdivision of Model Rule 7.9 requires licensees to retain attest documentation for 5 years from the report date unless otherwise specified by professional standards. California only maintains a documentation and retention requirement related to audits, which in California is for 7 years. The model rule contemplates attest services to include compilations, which in California compilations aren't considered attest services. The CBA may wish to consider implementing a mandatory documentation and retention policy for other services, at a minimum attest, but there may be other services the board wishes the documentation to be considered for as well. Should the CBA wish to explore either or both of these topics, it can direct staff to perform the necessary research and report back to the CBA at a future meeting. Staff are recommending that the CBA approve the proposed comment letter and direct staff to perform this necessary research and report back to the CBA at a future meeting on the following policy topics: submission of peer review related documentation and attest documentation and retention. With that, I'm happy to turn it back over to the chair and answer any questions members may have. Questions? Comments?
I have a question. I have a question, and that is as to the item that, one of the 2 items that you noted about all materials being required as opposed for submission, as opposed to our current rule, California's current rule of only those related to substandard reviews being. Is that a big deal? Would that be a lot of if we went with the proposal? Are we going to end up with a lot of filing, a lot of maybe it's electronic filing, but filing for no reason?
No, in all honesty, I would say the vast majority of this already exists anyways through the Facilitated State Board Access. We have access to all peer review results. There is a small group who can opt out as part of the process, and it would basically no longer allow them to opt out of having these documents put on the Facilitated State Board Access. And so I don't see this as being any significant issue for staff, but we haven't explored it in its entirety. But we do have access to basically every peer review result as it exists now. And electronically, it's housed on facilitated state board access at the AICPA. We just log into it via a secure portal.
Jose?
Some of the, I guess some of the history on that point is that there's some deep-rooted confidentiality type of concerns, and maybe not as much with the reports themselves once they're finalized and made available through this portal, right? So it sounds like, I wasn't aware that you've already got access to a vast majority of it. It sounds like there's some opt-out provision. There was a lot of dialogue about, I guess, other logistical pieces, and I don't know if that's part of the peer-reviewed documents that you're referencing here, in terms of, and I don't, maybe this is part of what you would need to explore, but there seem to be concerns about the back and forth that happens in the coordination with the administering entities and the firm trying to get their peer review done. And can you add any more color on that based on what you know now, or?
Yeah, so the documents they submit now to us are just the report and letter of acceptance, and then any remedial or corrective actions. So that would be the breadth of what we're looking at anyways, probably not the other kind of coordinated efforts. The one thing we would want to explore is there is a specific section, I believe, within 5076 that says that for purposes of the submission of peer review, it contemplates just substandard at this particular point, and those are sent to us for purpose of investigatory reasons. And so in that case, they are somewhat protected under the Public Records Act from being disclosed. That's an area we haven't necessarily explored as it relates to what would happen if we are receiving, not just having access to, but requiring receipt of peer review documents that are for pass with deficiencies or pass, and what that would mean, and whether or not we need to explore that particular statutory section and its implications. So that's why we haven't had a chance to really explore that with council to understand its implications, and that's why before we went down that path, we wanted to get the board's input.
Okay, and I guess my last question or just clarifier is at your memo, what page was it? Bottom of page 3, there's a reference to mandatory documentation and retention policy. Is that the same issue that you quote in the letter as one of the 2 items that would require further research?
Yeah.
Okay, just wanted to make sure it was the same one.
Yes.
I would move approval of the letter and staff's recommendation on this matter.
Is there a second?
I second it.
And is there any discussion? Is there any public comment? May we please have a roll call?
Okay, Jose Campos,
Yes?
Dan Jacobson,
Yes.
Luz Molina Lopez,
Yes.
Carrie Ann Farrell Hines,
Abstain.
Alicia Burhell,
Yes.
and Michael Savoy.
Yes.
So the motion passes, and the next item also deals with Mr. Franzella, a discussion of possible action on providing comments to the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants regarding revision to Chapter 3 of the Peer Review Oversight Handbook.
Thank you. So attachment 1 is to your materials is Chapter 3 of the Peer Review Oversight Handbook, and the CBA is being asked to assign the PRC, the Peer Review Oversight Committee, to review Chapter 3 of the Oversight Handbook, so the PRC can provide the CBA with feedback for possible comments to provide to the AICPA. Just for context, the Oversight Handbook is part of various materials that the AICPA has developed to aid in the overall administration of its peer review program. Last month, NASBA reached out to the various executive directors for the state boards of accountancy related to changes that the AICPA has been contemplating and considering related to the Oversight Handbook since August of last year. The AICPA agreed to delay implementing revisions to Chapter 3 to provide NASBA and the state boards of accountancy an opportunity to provide comments. NASBA informed staff that it was looking for feedback by last Friday. Staff informed NASBA that any feedback the CBA could provide would not occur until after the conclusion of this meeting. Chapter 3 of the Oversight Handbook provides guidance to the AICPA's various administering entities related to confidentiality of peer review information in a regulatory environment. On page 3 of your materials for this item, I've included the 3 kind of points of concerns NASBA shared with the executive directors regarding the revisions to this chapter. In addition, staff have provided 2 comment letters sent by other state boards, specifically North Carolina and Wyoming, which are attachments 4 and 5 respectively, that further reinforce concerns raised by NASBA. Basically, it appears the primary crux of the concerns relate not to the revisions themselves, mainly that the AICPA from the state boards and NASBA's perspective continue to mischaracterize the role of regulators and how peer review now functions in a regulatory environment. Based on a preliminary review, it does appear that the concerns raised by NASBA and the other state boards is appropriate. Staff have had limited opportunity to review the proposed changes prior to the preparation of these meeting materials. Further, to really assess the totality of Chapter 3, the CBA may wish to involve the PROC as it has primary responsibility for oversighting the administering entities. Staff do realize that assigning it to the PRC goes well beyond the requested feedback date. However, to provide any meaningful comment and input to the AICPA and other state boards and NASBA, staff believe that the PRC feedback is an important component for this board. The PRC next meets May 3rd, and staff and the PRC will be able to report back to the CBA at the CBA meeting in May, middle of May of this year, regarding any findings that are found. Staff recommend that the CBA direct the PRC to evaluate Chapter 3 of the Oversight Handbook and provide feedback to the CBA at the May meeting. If the CBA approves this recommendation, staff will communicate next steps to NASBA and the AICPA. With that, I will turn it back over to the chair and happy to answer any questions members may have.
Thank you. Are there any questions or discussion?
I move to approve staff's recommendation.
Is there a second?
I second.
Is there any public comment?
Have we already distributed the proposed changes to the PROC members?
No, we were waiting for direction from the board first.
And we would try to do that well in advance of their normal May distribution of materials, just to get them thinking through that. I think that's the right committee to have this ad and get their feedback and further inform our response.
Absolutely.
When is the PROC meeting? Before our meeting in May?
May 3rd, so likely any feedback the members will get would probably come in second mail out of materials, simply because of the timing element, but we'll be able to provide it in second mail out as well as presentations at the board meeting.
Public comment?
What's the response date?
May we please call the roll?
Okay, Michael Savoy.
Yes.
Alicia Burhow.
Yes.
Carrie Ann Farrell Hines.
Yes.
Luz Molina Lopez.
Yes.
Dan Jacobson
Yes.
and Jose Campos.
Yes.
Thank you.
So that's the end of our agenda. Are there any comments from the public regarding any comments from the public? And do any committee members have any agenda items for future meetings? This meeting is now adjourned.